Our next speaker, I love the explanation the next speaker wrote in the bio. A canine pretending to be a web engineer. Ava Wroten just said, a canine pretending to be a web engineer. Well, I hope you can shepherd us into this next speech. Shepherd us into this next speech, because he said canine. And then I said shepherd, because I shouldn't have, is really what happened. Yeah, let's listen to Ava. She's probably a lot smarter than I am. All righty. I am not a dad. Stop. Yes, I am. Doggone it. Okay, I'm going to cry. Bye, everybody.
That's actually way more appropriate than you would have thought, Kenneth. That's my avatar as well. It's a German Shepherd. So actually pretty appropriate. Okay, I will share my screen here. And here we are. Move some of the Zoom windows out of the way and we'll get started. So yes, we are going to be today talking about building the Dream UI component library. I know, lofty goal, mostly it's my dream. And it is because I am starting to work at a job that actually lets me live a little bit of this dream. I am working at Oncue as a UI engineer. And it is my exciting opportunity to be able to do a lot of really great things in a greenfield application. And I'll be talking a little bit about what my day-to-day job is. Building a design system where engineers, designers, quality assurance, product, and all those different people can use and collaborate together. We'll talk about some standards and technologies. And well, we're actually going to be doing a little bit of live coding, and I'll touch on accessibility and testing along the way. Some of what I'll be touching hopefully will be related to some of the panel that we just heard, especially from Debbie and Jen as well. Some of their topics were particularly relevant to what we'll be getting into here. So we do not need to do this in React for what I'll be talking about today. However, just to get us started, I will be building out a React app, and I will just let that install in the background while I am going through some other key points. So I'm going to run an npx and create a React app. For those of you who don't know, npx is basically like npm, except I don't need to globally install, or at least that's a short version of the difference. So that is building in the background. It's getting all the yarn dependencies and things like that. What we will be building is a design system and a tool called Storybook. And well, I need to answer a lot of questions. First of all, what is a design system? This is a wonderful article all about what a design system is not, and whether or not it is for you. There's a lot to it. Larger companies like Airbnb, Uber, Microsoft are starting to get together and build design systems. It's really about taking small components and putting them together and making bigger components out of the small ones. It's almost like a brand style guide, but for the application, with the hope being that you'll have a consistent visual, maybe even consistent technical implementation across your web apps, marketing sites, docs, and other things like that, maybe even multiple applications. So again, this goes into all the details. But what's really cool is Storybook is framework agnostic, despite us using React today. You can do this in Vue, Angular, Ember, even just raw HTML does not matter. All these things will apply. So let's imagine that you were given a bunch of designs in maybe Figma or Sketch, for example, and you needed to compose some reusable UI components, maybe to make some design tokens with some specific brand colors, and make a documentation site for maybe this is an NPM package that you use internally, for example. If it sounds like a lot of work, yeah, it can be, which is why this might not be for everyone. You might not need a design system, but I particularly think that they are incredibly useful. Some of the things I think they're super useful for is I think they're useful for cross-team collaboration. I think they help speed up the time to build out new things. They can be a great source of truth, both in the design and the code. You can build out component level automation tests. You can have mobile and accessibility checks, and it helps you be very future ready. So there are all kinds of great articles here. And if you want to follow along with any of these links that I'll be jumping between, they are all in the Notion page that I have put into the Discord and the slides channel. Okay, so we have React installed locally. I'm going to install another thing here, which is SB, which is short for Storybook. And what it's going to do, allow me to go into the project first and then run it. Luckily, it let me know that there was something odd going on. So it was like, hey, are you sure you want to install it here? Because Storybook or SB init is not made for empty projects. It says what it would like to be inside of, for example, a Create React app. And so that's what we are doing here. It's able to intelligently know what it needs to set itself up, including the components and stories. And it will come out with something a bit like this. And we'll see that in just a moment. And I wanted to call out that these are not coming out of nowhere. Like a Storybook isn't just a random technology I decided to talk about today. Storybook is based on some standards that are out there, in particular the component story format standard. And this is an open standard that you can see right on GitHub. And it's using ES6 modules. And it's really smart about the way it does a lot of different things. Ultimately, it looks a lot like this, making a mycomponent.story.js file. And you can have titles and components, decorators, all these kinds of really nice things. And we will get into what that looks like in practice. Okay, so I'm going to now just run Storybook. I'm going to open up another side pane here on the right. And I'm going to open up our project and jump into the package.json. So if I were to scroll down a bit, we can see that there are some scripts here. And in particular, there are some Storybook scripts that it added for us automatically, which is what we are running. So thank you very much, Storybook, for getting us started. And it has opened up right here. Here is our Storybook running locally with React. We see over here on the left that it has given us some examples to start with, including this page right here, which tells us a little bit of what we've built, like what is this thing, as well as some components that we can dive into soon. Okay, so we have a React app and we have a Storybook layer on top of it. So it says that we recommend building UIs with a component-driven process. Let's give that a quick look. And in here, it talks about what it means to really build components. Now, if you've been building component-based apps for a long time, a lot of this is not new to you, but this is one of the cleanest explanations I've ever seen for how to really do it. And I like a lot of the ideas that are here, such as building one component at a time, such as a button or an input, for example, and then thinking about how you combine those components. For example, making a table or a list that might have several of these smaller components combined. And then you can assemble those larger components into pages. This is where you start seeing the idea of a design system start coming into place. It talks all about the different benefits you can get, some of what's already talked about. And it talks about some complementary trends, including, there it is, design systems. So it's all interconnected. Down here, you can learn more. This is a wonderful link about how to actually start coding one of these, which is what I'll dive into in a second. And also atomic design. Atomic design is something that's been out for a long while. It's a project mostly written by Brad Frost. And it's a book that I highly recommend. And it's what we are adopting at Oncue. But put simply, it's that same idea as what we just saw on the last page, where you have things like atoms for very small components. It is basically the smallest functional component. And then you can combine atoms into larger molecules, which can then be combined into organisms, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see how this starts to scale. Okay, So if you were following along or like you wanted to follow, the yarn installation steps for any of these things, you would wind up with this. And these are some wonderful guides to get you started, including some presets, styling, all that kind of stuff, learning, documentation, in-depth guides, and a wonderful Discord community. This file that we're looking at right here is just an extended markdown file that has automatically built out this page. So you can edit that with regular old markdown, or you can look at this button component, which is just a standard React component. And it is rendered in a canvas, and there's also some docs here that are automatically generated. And we can pass in things like dynamic variables like true and false for our primary. We can change the label to button hello, and we can see it all live updating up here. So that's pretty cool. You can see how this could be your docs for people to consume your components. We also have stories over here on the left. This is that component like CSF format. So we have a primary story, a secondary story, a large, and a small, showing the primary different ways that you can utilize these components. Okay, so we've seen a little bit of these examples. Let's get our hands dirty with a little bit of code, and we'll see how much I can get done within, about the next 10 minutes. So we're going to jump into the source directory. And in here, we see that there is not a whole lot here, but we are going to take a look at, I thought there was going to be an example there. Let's see here. Where is my button component? There it is. It's not called example, it's called button. So we have some stories here like button.js, button CSS, and button stories.js. And so I'm going to emulate this with some of our own code. So I'm going to create some files. I'm going to create something, let's make a select dropdown. So we're going to say select.js. We'll also make a select.css, a select.stories.js, and I'll also make a test file in case I get time to test it. Select.test.js. Great. So we can see that those files have been created for us, and I can jump into one. I like to copy and paste. So I'm going to be jumping back and forth between the button example and our select code. And I'm going to start just ripping pieces and putting it into our code. So I'm going to take these imports and slam it in there. And instead of importing the button CSS, we'll import our select CSS, which is currently empty, but we'll get there. And this is our code for a basic React component. This is for the button. And I'm going to just start wiping out most of this code that we don't really need. Leaving it with the bare bones. So we're going to export a const of select, which is the name of our component. And we'll just bring in props for now. Let's export, let's return rather a component like HTML, and we'll pass in those props so that anything like a disabled attribute, for example, can automatically flow through here. And we will do just an example option here. So we'll say example, just hard code it just so we can see what is happening. Okay, great. So we've gotten started there. We don't need a lot of this other code. We see some stuff happening with prop types and default props. Well, we'll get to there soon. Okay, the other thing that we need in order for this to show up is a story. And we made a select stories file. Let's also open up the button stories file and start doing the same thing. We're going to start copying and pasting. So I'm going to bring in our select component, import select from select, and we'll just start swapping out everything like this. And we can get rid of this arg types stuff. We won't be needing it. Okay, great. Let's change where this is going to be. This is the category. So we can say this is all of our awesome stuff. Okay, so we're almost there in order to see something in our app. We're going to pull in the template code. In this case, it is just button, and we can just switch that out for a select. And we'll comment out the args for now. And once again, replace this with, well, we'll actually make it be called default. Okay, we come back over to Storybook and we see awesome stuff and we see select. However, I believe that there is a JavaScript error or my browser is just locking up. Either way is pretty awesome for a demo. Ooh, this page is slowing down Firefox. You need to speed up your browser. Okay, we're just gonna close that and reopen it. And if it fails one more time, then I will take a look at my imports. Yep, looks like it is failing. We get to debug this live, everybody. So let's take a look at our JavaScript here. So we're exporting const select. Let's get rid of this CSS import and maybe this import, really simplify it down, only export the things that we really need. Select open, select close, and we're importing React, import select from select. We're in the same directory. Okay, let's see if we can make that happen one more time. Ooh, I might be hitting a roadblock here for this demo, unfortunately. But that is okay. I planned for this. I really wanted to be able to show you some super exciting, like live coding and see it showing up on the page. However, I can still get to most of my key points, even if it is not rendering on the page for me. Very sorry about that. Thank you for hanging with me. What we would have seen is it would have shown up just like the example button component, and we could have played around with the args down there at the bottom. For example, we could have started passing in args like, let's say, options, which could have been an array of options, right? Like a cat and a dog, a dag, a dog. And we can start passing in like dynamic options for our stories and start building out some like really great previews of what the select component looks like. Something that is also really cool is now that I have kind of this together with a valid story that's being exported, what I would be able to do is actually do some unit tests that are tied to our stories in Storybook. So a lot of the time, we would be normally just bringing in our React component directly for a test. But instead, if we're already rendering out stories with ideal use cases that have things passed into them, like a primary button or a select with options, we can just reuse that in our test. Luckily, here's an example of what I basically would have written. And we can see here that this is all the same like React stuff that we're kind of used to, but instead of importing in a component directly, we're able to import in the story, and we're able to render the story along with any of the args that it has tied to it. And then we're able to do something like getting by role button, so targeting accessibility instead of test IDs whenever possible. And this is just doing an example of making sure it has the valid text content. And so this is really great and powerful. I like being able to do it by story. And it also encourages us to get closer to accessibility. So how do we get closer to accessibility in this way? Well, there are several different add-ons which I was going to install and show you firsthand. One of which is Storybook A11Y. And let's go over to the GitHub page for this. I expected there to be more screenshots, but either way, this is essentially what you would be seeing. You would be seeing something kind of like this with a list of violations and passes for your component. This is all running through Axe Core. And so it's automated, like looking at the code, your HTML, that's all being rendered out here and letting you know some ways that you can improve the accessibility on the component that you have just written. This is super powerful, and I really love working with this tool. There are also some other tools out there. There is one that's actually very similar to this for mobile, and it allows you to preview what your component would look like in a smaller form factor. And it also will alert you to, in a very, as this accessibility one, any violations you have for mobile. So it'll do like some mobility readiness checks. And it will let you know like, hey, these interactable elements are too close together, and you could have a finger that would be really hard to press on any of these elements. Or one I ran into the other day was an input field that it really suggested I had an autocomplete on. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Why? And then it gave me all the explanations of why it's really important for mobile. And I was able to go in there and correct it. Another really powerful tool for Storybook are design tokens. This one has a really great demo that I can just pull up and show. That is powered by just raw CSS. In fact, it's powered by CSS custom properties because we're living in 2021 and we can do that now. So this is a variable name of a class, of a like a color here. So B, or I suppose it's blue 100, blue 200, etc. And instead of having to write out these documentation pages, it's all automatically generated directly from your CSS, including things like your gradients, being able to preview all of it. And then you can make markdown pages to automatically pull these in as well to write documentation instead of lorem ipsum with these things being previewed. So you can see exactly what these animations would do, exactly what the colors, the borders look like, including border radiuses and all of your font families. These are the kind of things that we've been seeing in style guides for a long time that have been very manually written, or that there have been sporadic different living style guide tools out there that have been kind of coming and going for a long time. And I think Storybook, along with its brilliant community and its add-ons, can really bring all these different things together. So, okay, last thing I want to touch on. Let's say that you build out your components. You've got your CSS, you've got your JavaScript, your tests, all that, and then you want to start deploying. There's a great tool called Chromatic, which is made by the Storybook maintainers. And you can gather UI feedback along with visual testing and documentation, all those great things. This is free for most use cases. And you can hook it into your GitHub or your Circle CI deploys, anything like that. And you can start collaborating with your team and start getting visual regression testing immediately. So at the end, what do you wind up with? You wind up with a living style guide design system that you're ready to go and build out new features very quickly with visual regression testing, accessibility, mobile testing, automatic deployment, and a lot of other really great, powerful things powered by Storybook and CSFs. Now, that's what I have for you today. Thank you very much. And thank you for being patient with me during some code demo issues. I appreciate your time and have a great rest of your time at MagnoliaJS. Thank you for having me.